Hey there. Looks like you're really diving deep into mental health support and specifically this whole peer support thing. Pretty fascinating stuff, right? We're going to take a deep dive into that today using this December 2024 Time magazine as our guide.
It's really interesting you're focusing on this. Peer support is having a real moment right now, but what's really fascinating is it's not exactly a new idea.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, people have always helped each other out, right? But when did this become more
Uh,
official?
Time actually traces back to the mid-20th century with the rise of those consumer and survivor movements. People with lived experience of mental health challenges really started advocating for more agency and challenging the traditional, often, I guess you could say, paternalistic approaches to treatment.
So it was less about doctors dictating treatment and more about patients having a say in their own care.
Exactly. And this shift really took off in the 70s and 80s with groups like Alcoholics Anonymous and the National Alliance on Mental Illness. These organizations created spaces for people to connect, share coping strategies, and offer each other support based on their shared experiences.
Yeah, finding people who truly get it can be so powerful. Time even mentions a story about a woman who um, felt really misunderstood by her therapist, but found solace connecting with someone who'd faced similar struggles. It seems like that kind of empathy is really at the heart of peer support.
Absolutely. And that shared understanding can be incredibly valuable, especially considering the state of mental health care today. Time reports a staggering 42% of Americans reported mental health concerns in 2022, but only 23% were seeing a therapist.
Wow, that's a huge gap. I can see why people are looking for alternatives. So is that one of the reasons peer support is becoming so popular?
Well, it's definitely a factor. Access to traditional therapy is limited by, well, cost and availability. A therapy session can easily cost hundreds of dollars, while peer support groups are often free or low cost, making them much more accessible.
So that makes them a lifeline for a lot of people. But what does the research say? Does peer support actually work?
Well, Time cites a 2021 study published in the journal Psychiatric Services. It found that participation in peer support was associated with significant reductions in hospital readmission rates for people with serious mental illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder.
That's pretty impressive. So it's not just about feeling better, it's actually leading to tangible improvements in people's lives.
Exactly. The study also found that participants reported feeling less alone, more empowered to manage their condition, and more hopeful about their future.
It sounds almost too good to be true. Are there any downsides or limitations to peer support that we should be aware of?
Of course, while the potential benefits are really exciting, it's crucial to also consider the limitations. Peer support is not a replacement for professional treatment for serious mental health conditions. For example, someone experiencing a psychotic episode needs medical intervention, not just peer support.
Right, that makes sense. It's about finding the right level of support for each individual's needs. Time also mentions some concerns about the lack of standardized training for peer supporters. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it's a valid concern. Unlike therapists who undergo rigorous training and licensing, there's no universal standard for peer support training. This lack of standardization can lead to inconsistencies in the quality and safety of peer support services.
So how can someone considering peer support make sure they're finding a reputable and well-trained supporter? That's going to be on people's minds as they learn more about this.
It's definitely something to consider. Time suggests looking for programs that provide clear information about their training methods and qualifications. Ideally, peer supporters should have received training in active listening, communication skills, boundaries, and crisis intervention.
Okay, those are some good things to look for. And it's a good reminder that peer support, like any form of support, comes with its own set of considerations. Time also touches on this new wave of peer support apps.
Yeah. These apps are designed to connect people with shared experiences in a more immediate and accessible way. One example highlighted is Fellow, where users can chat with others who understand what they're going through.
It's interesting that even with all the technology available, people still crave that human connection, especially when facing mental health challenges. But are these apps truly providing peer support, or are they just another form of social media?
That's a question a lot of people are asking. And honestly, it's a debate that's still unfolding. Some experts see these apps as a valuable extension of traditional peer support, offering real-time connection and a sense of belonging. Others worry they might be oversimplifying complex issues or creating a false sense of security.
So it sounds like a bit of a gray area. Time mentions some experts are concerned about the lack of regulation in this space.
That's right. Not all apps are created equal, and there are concerns about the potential for harm if these platforms aren't adequately monitored.
So it's important to be discerning and choose apps that prioritize safety and quality. You really got to do your homework before diving in. Time also quotes Dr. John Torres, who's a director at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center.
He raises a good point. He compares newer apps like Fellow to those that have been around longer, like Hey Peers, Hear Me, and Wisdo. He says platforms including Hey Peers, Hear Me, and Wisdo have been around for a while, and companies have dealt with safety issues like suicidal support. But he adds, paying to chat with strangers who may or may not have the training or licensure to really help people. Fellow are these people, really?
That's a big question. It seems like the digital landscape of peer support is still evolving, and it's important to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another important point, the potential for contagion in peer support, which Time also highlights as a concern.
Contagion. That sounds kind of ominous. What exactly does that mean in this context?
It's not as scary as it sounds, but it is something to be aware of. Essentially, it refers to the possibility that exposure to others' mental health challenges could worsen someone's own symptoms. So imagine someone struggling with anxiety joins a group where everyone's, sharing their anxieties. It might inadvertently heighten their own anxiety.
Yeah. Right. So it's like the opposite of finding comfort and validation. It's actually amplifying those negative feelings.
Exactly. And this is something that's more likely to happen in online settings, where it's harder to moderate content and ensure everyone's safety. Time points out this is a particularly big concern with some of these newer peer support apps where anyone can sign up and start sharing without any real, vetting or oversight.
That is a bit concerning. Sounds like navigating the world of peer support, both online and offline, requires a good deal of discernment.
Absolutely. It's crucial to be an informed consumer, to understand the potential benefits and risks, and to choose wisely. Time emphasizes the importance of informed consent, making sure individuals understand what peer support is, what it isn't, and the potential risks involved.
So it's about making sure people are going into it with their eyes wide open, not just jumping on the bandwagon because it's trendy.
Precisely. And it's also about recognizing that peer support is not a one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one person might not work for another, and it's important to find what feels right for you.
That brings us to another point that Time touches on, which is the potential for peer support to be co-opted or commercialized. They use the analogy of overpriced athleisure brands. I thought that was pretty clever.
Yeah, it's a striking comparison, isn't it? The concern is that peer support could become another trendy commodity, with companies profiting off people's vulnerabilities instead of genuinely empowering them.
Yeah, it would be a shame to see something with so much potential for good turn into just another way to make a quick buck.
Absolutely. The true power of peer support lies in its human-centered approach, in fostering genuine connection and shared understanding. It shouldn't be about profits, it should be about people.
Well said. So where do we go from here? What does the future hold for peer support?
Well, Time suggests that the demand for peer support is only going to continue to grow. It'll be driven by factors like increasing mental health awareness,
Yeah.
limited access to traditional services, and the desire for more personalized and community-based approaches to well-being.
So it sounds like peer support is poised to play an even bigger role in the mental health landscape. But how can we ensure it grows in a way that benefits everyone and avoids those potential pitfalls we've been talking about?
That's the million-dollar question. Time highlights the need for more research to better understand the effectiveness of different models of peer support and to identify best practices. They also emphasize the importance of establishing clear ethical guidelines and standards for training and certification.
So it's about building a solid foundation for the future, making sure peer support is sustainable and truly serves the needs of the people it's meant to help.
Exactly. And it's also about promoting greater collaboration between peer support providers and traditional mental health professionals. These two worlds don't have to be separate. They can work together to create a more integrated and holistic approach to mental health care.
I like that. A more collaborative and inclusive approach. Seems like there's a lot of potential for positive change happening in this space.
There is. And I think one of the most exciting aspects of peer support is its potential to challenge the stigma surrounding mental health. When people with lived experience share their stories openly and authentically, it helps to normalize mental health challenges and create a more accepting and supportive society.
That's a really powerful point. Peer support isn't just about providing practical help. It's about changing the conversation around mental health.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that shift in the conversation is essential for creating a world where everyone feels comfortable seeking help when they need it.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of peer support. We've covered a lot of ground from the historical roots to the current landscape and everything in between.
We have, and I think it's important to emphasize that this is just the beginning of your exploration. There's so much more to learn and discover about peer support.
So, where would you recommend our listener go from here? What are some resources they could explore to learn more about peer support and perhaps even get involved?
Well, there's a wealth of information available online. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, has a great website with a wealth of resources on peer support, including information on finding local peer support groups and training programs.
That's a great starting point. What about for those interested in exploring the world of peer support apps?
Well, Time does mention a few specific apps. You might find it helpful to start your research with some of the established platforms like Hey Peers, Hear Me, and Wisdo. Remember, always be sure to research any app before using it. You want to look for clear information on their website about their safety measures, the training and qualifications of their peer supporters, and how they handle sensitive information.
That's great advice. It's important to be an informed consumer, especially when it comes to something as personal as mental health support.
Absolutely. And I would also encourage your listener to connect with local mental health organizations in their community. Many offer peer support programs or can provide referrals to reputable providers.
So it's about tapping into both online and offline resources to find the support that best meets your needs.
Exactly. And remember, the journey to well-being is unique for each individual. Peer support can be a valuable tool, but it's just one piece of the puzzle.
It's been really eye-opening to explore all these different aspects of peer support. I'm especially intrigued by the idea of peer support challenging that stigma around mental health. Seems like that's a key piece of creating a more supportive and inclusive world, wouldn't you say?
It really is. When people with lived experience share their stories openly, it helps others feel less alone, less ashamed, and more willing to seek help when they need it. It's about breaking down those barriers and creating a sense of community where everyone feels seen and heard.
I love that idea. So it's like peer support isn't just about providing support in the moment, but it's also about creating a ripple effect that changes the way we think and talk about mental health as a whole.
Exactly. And I think that's where the real power of peer support lies, and its ability to transform not just individual lives, but also the culture at large. Imagine a world where seeking help for mental health challenges is as normal and accepted as seeking help for a physical ailment.
That's a powerful vision. And it seems like peer support has the potential to play a big role in making that vision a reality.
It does. But it's important to remember that this isn't a quick fix, right? It's an ongoing process that requires commitment, collaboration, and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
So what can we do as individuals to contribute to this movement? I mean, how can we help foster a more supportive and inclusive world for mental health?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to be open-minded and willing to listen. When someone shares their story with you, don't judge or offer unsolicited advice. Just listen with empathy and understanding.
Yeah, that sounds simple enough, but I know it can be challenging sometimes, especially when someone is sharing something really painful or difficult.
It is. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is simply to be a compassionate witness to their experience.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about if someone wants to take a more active role? Are there ways to get involved in the peer support movement beyond just listening to others?
Absolutely. There are so many ways to get involved. You could volunteer at a local mental health organization, participate in a peer support group, or even become a trained peer support specialist.
I bet our listener is really curious about how they can make a difference in their own community.
Well, if you're interested in becoming a trained peer support specialist, there are programs available both online and in person. You can find more information about these programs through organizations like NAMI or the Mental Health America.
Those are great resources. And I would add that even if you don't feel ready to take on a formal role, there are still countless ways to contribute. Something as simple as sharing your own story, if you feel comfortable doing so, can help to break down stigma and encourage others to seek help.
That's so true. Every act of sharing, every act of listening, every act of kindness contributes to creating a more supportive and inclusive world. It's a collective effort, and we all have a role to play.
This deep dive has been truly inspiring. It's given me a lot to think about in terms of how I can support both myself and others in navigating the complexities of mental health. I hope our listener feels the same way.
I hope so too. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a whole community of people out there who understand what you're going through and are ready to offer support and connection.
That's a beautiful reminder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of peer support. Keep those questions coming, and until next time, stay curious.